Guys, it's 1 minute past, so I think we'll start kick off and then we'll let other people join. Yeah,
Works for me.
cool. So thank you everyone for joining. This is our first webinar that we're doing for the Gaia CC community. You're all muted at the moment, don't worry. We'll take questions at the end. Just pop your questions into the chat if you would. We have the pleasure of welcoming today Chris Marron from CMA Intelligence. We've had a lot of discussions about with consultants what they're looking for with various webinars. This one has been the most popular to look at the data element that's coming into to CCaaS and CX and AI and how that's important. So Chris is going to cover that. He's going to also cover some very interesting points on where messaging is coming from the leadership and where it's coming from the C-level. All great stuff. We hope you enjoy the presentation. Please put some questions in the chat so we can ask at the end. And I'll hand over to Chris. Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ian, and James, thank you very much as well. Everyone in the audience, it's a pleasure to be presenting. And yeah, I look forward to the questions at the end. So diving in, I very much mean this slide in the best possible way, but for anyone who's done the job in the contact center, we've felt this at some point. Customers never call because everything is going perfectly. That customer call is always a fire. It's always a problem. It's always something that we need to solve. And at best, from the customer side, it's an irritation. At worst, it's a real crisis. And as a contact center, you are always taking the punch for the business on that front. The reality is that those customers aren't happy. They are frustrated. There's some pain there, and you need to be calmly dealing with it. You need to be having those fires all around you and dealing with it. And generally, as a contact center, you're dealing with it on a shoestring budget. You're usually overloaded. There's generally pretty high attrition because, I mean, let's face it, it takes a certain someone to take those punches, to sit in the fire and kind of be like, well, at least my coffee isn't going cold. You need a certain personality to get on with it. And for a lot of people, that is a difficult environment to be in. So there's a lot of challenge to being in the contact center. And for the company, generally people only care when you mess it up. It's only getting attention from the company when something goes wrong. So, when you're talking to contact center leaders, you get a lot of people who are very good at rolling with the punches and dealing with those challenges. And that is the reality that we've been living in for really quite a long time. It's not a great reality to be in, but it's what we as a community are experts in supporting. We've been very good historically about keeping those fires under control, about keeping those contact centers supported in that very challenging environment. Now, I love this stat because it really does capture that problem brilliantly. And I want to give a real shout out to Shep here. He's a phenomenal speaker. If you don't follow him, you definitely should. But the reality is, in the contact center, people don't want to be engaging. It's not an interaction that customers themselves want to have. No one's ever delighted to call customer service. When you get to the point where a solid 40% would rather clean a toilet than they would actually call customer service, and that's an expression of preference. That's the toilet's the better option. That is a definite challenge, and it's a difficult scenario for the industry where if we look at the business drive, businesses really want to be delivering that great experience. Now, these are direct quotes from every Gartner MQ vendor for CCaaS. And there's a massive gap between that reality of 40% would rather clean a toilet than call up and that vendor marketing. So this is a deliberate gap. It's the vendors recognize that people aren't really there, but they're selling that aspiration. And there's an enormous amount of spend that's gone into working out exactly where businesses want to be and what they want to deliver. You can find exactly this from all the CRM, CEC vendors as well. So, your Salesforce, your Microsoft, ServiceNow, Zendesk, you could get the exact same messaging. And you could do it with a couple of other terms, empowerment, transformation, delivery, loyalty. But what they're doing is they're speaking to an aspiration rather than to a reality. So it's something that's close enough to become a but what if we could? And it's that slightly emotional trigger of it would be a better world if we could do it. And just in case you think I'm pulling your leg, I've taken some screenshots of exactly those phrases that I had previously. Feel free to grab them on the replay. I also love that stat that Catherine's just put in saying the mental health is affected by the job. It is absolutely taking a punch. 83% of agents saying mental health is affected by the job sounds about right. You're facing some fairly difficult challenges, and that existing challenge is hard enough to deal with. But unfortunately, as consultants, it's not even the only challenge that we have to solve for. So we've got this situation where we're already in a difficult spot. Agents are already suffering mentally, and you're dealing with that everything on fire, the shoestring budget, the mental health, the messy technology architectures, internal challenges, the full works. As consultants, vendors are selling that aspiration, that hope that you want to get to. And the job for consultants has always been to be the voice of reason, to ground the challenges in reality, and to find a path, maybe not to delighting customers, but to at least making it a bit better, to improving those metrics, to making it easier. Now, we have that same gap between the aspiration and the reality with AI. Vendors are still very much selling the aspiration, and it's not that it's impossible to get to the aspiration. There are a few examples that do hit that aspiration. They are the exception rather than the rule. But generally, that's an aspiration that most businesses will really struggle to get to. And for executives, historically, they know that there's been a gap between the aspiration and the reality for the contact center and for delighting customers, but they don't know as much about that gap between the reality and the aspiration for AI. They are less aware of that gap. Now, even customer service leads in the contact center who are living, you know, dealing with customers day in, day out, they know the metrics, they know the systems, they know the setup. Even for them, AI is new, and there is a lot of knowing enough to know what they don't know. You can have 30 years of experience in the contact center, and there are a few leaders I've talked to with that who have yet to touch AI. They're still, particularly if you talk to some of the government leaders and so on, they're still in a situation where AI is a future aspiration that they're going to implement at some point. Most of the leads have touched it, but it's kind of we're dabbling with a tool that we don't really understand fully. And the problem that those leads are facing is you get this mandate that comes down from leadership, and it's this I need you to do the AI thing. And as a contact center leader, you're not an AI expert. For most IT leaders, you're still not an AI expert. And even if you are an AI specialist, you're scrambling to keep up with how rapidly the industry is changing. So you have this universal challenge coming up, and it is a mandate that comes down. It's board, it's C-suite, but it's loosely defined, it's open to interpretation, and it's a come and deliver some results, come and present the strategy back to me. It's a go figure it out. And the feeling that comes from the leadership when they're delivering that mandate is that they will know what good looks like when they see it. And quite often it'll be, your quarterly target is to do something with AI, and that'll affect your bonuses, and it'll, what you present back will affect how we view your performance. But it's a go figure it out and present it back to us. Now, for the leadership, the senior executives who are looking at this, and I want to give a shout out to Contact Babel here because they have great stats, but what they're looking at is very often a version of this pie chart. They're looking at the expenses, they see the contact center as a cost center, and they look at it and they say, well, okay, of this cost, 81% is labor. Now that's salaries for agents, that's salaries for IT and management, that's salaries for training, the cost of training agents, and then that's also recruitment costs. Between that, you've got, you know, 4/5 roughly, and it does depend by contact center. This is an average for the UK, but it's roughly 80% of the cost in the contact center is labor. And they see that as a potentially automatable cost. So they see very real potential for value in that automation. They are hearing about the value of AI all over the place, and they see it as an aspiration that can be achieved. So they're pushing that mandate down. Now, the problem with that mandate, and Gartner have started getting irked when people talk about the hype cycle. So I'm taking a little bit of a fresh approach here, and it might get me into some trouble. But the problem we have is you have a meme of the golf playing executive who's heard all about AI, and they've had their last trip to the golf club, and now they're trying to one up the golf buddies and whatever else. And it's a meme, but it is grounded in reality. And they are at that point on the Dunning-Kruger curve where they don't know very much at all, but they have a lot of confidence in what they know. They are absolutely confident that they can drive real gains for the business and that they can get real value out of this. So they are then pushing the contact center leader who knows a bit more, but knows enough to know that they really don't know enough to deliver, and that they're getting that kind of attention grabbing marketing hype headline and pushing it at the contact center. And then the contact center is trying to figure out that complexity. They're trying to figure out, okay, how do I actually apply this? How do I present it back to my leadership? And one of the big challenges that they're facing is when they present back to the leadership, they don't want to be perceived to be presenting problems and perceived to be being a blocker and perceived to be failing to deliver. There's a thin line between presenting reality and making excuses for why you can't deliver, and that's difficult to manage internally. Now, some of that challenge is very much on us. As an industry, we're very acronym heavy. It is a little bit of a dark art. There's people who get contact center and there's people who don't get contact center, and executives are definitely the ones who don't get contact center. But customer service is an executive priority, so they need to be able to get contact center. And the real challenge is there's very real and very significant value in AI. It's a very steep learning curve, and there's a lot of pitfalls on that learning curve. But if you can educate them and start to provide a path, and as a consultant, our job has to be to try and provide that education. We can get them towards that value, so we can pull them out of that valley of despair and into getting to some real value and real reason. And that is something that as consultants we've always done. We've in traditionally for CCaaS, we've always been that voice of reason. We've always been able to present reality to those who need reality presented to them, and to guide people towards, okay, this is what you can actually achieve on that push towards aspiration. That's never changed. It is a wider audience than we're used to. It is a more educational focus than we're used to. We are dealing with some senior executives who need to understand customer service, who need to understand the technologies, and it's a wider range of technologies. And beyond that, there's also more change management involved in that. So we are having to deal with increasingly, it's not just the customer service that changes, but it's a lot of the processes and workflows behind it, and that does cause some real pain. Um, for us, our job is to kind of take those mismatched expectations, to ground them in reality, to build that path to success. And to do that, we do have to get over some hurdles. The first one is getting the different stakeholders aligned. And that is both dealing with that vision that the executives have, which is very often, I want to automate away labor. It's dealing with the vision that the contact center has, which is I want to make life better for the customer. And ideally I'd like to be hit in the face a little bit less, please, so that my mental health doesn't quite, suffer as much as it is. But it's an internal mess where You will also then, as you're starting to step into the workflows, have stakeholders for other processes. Marketing can start to get involved, sales can start to get involved. You can have different people with different interests, and building that alignment is very difficult. People don't have it figured out. I'm giving a shout out to Call Center Help for this data. They asked a brilliant question. I do wish they'd asked it in their 2025 survey as well as the 2024 and 23, but the data shows that the vast majority of companies do not have a joined up set AI strategy. Sometimes there's a departmental strategy, but for the significant majority, it is no strategy. And in that 2025 report, we are seeing that over half of contact centers are struggling because of conflicting business priorities. Over a quarter are not seeing a barrier because they're not aligned with other departments. Now, if everyone's pulling in different directions, we can't deliver value. It's a real challenge to get that value there if everyone's working towards a different goal. You're never going to achieve a goal when there's 6 different goals that conflict with each other. So as consultants, we need to set those expectations at a reasonable level to avoid keeping our contact center leader trapped in a no-win scenario. But we also need to bring everyone together so that that contact center leader can go back and present to a team and have that team agree with them. The challenge that comes though is even when we've got everyone aligned, even when we can get a central team in place and we can get them enough contact center and AI understanding to start getting there, they still need to understand their business well enough and understand how they can apply that technology to their business to get there. So we have a very political challenge, but we also have quite a solid educational and operational challenge. Now, these are vendor surveys, but even with that alignment and understanding, even if when you have that goal set, you can't just turn AI on. Businesses are always a real mess behind the curtain. AI is not a turnkey thing that you just deploy out of the box. You need to be able to get that right data. You need to be able to put it into the right place. So you don't just need to be able to pull data out of those legacy systems, but you need to be able to move it between systems. You need your systems to talk to each other. And it seems Catherine and I are agreeing very much today because it very much is those internal silos that prevent the great experience. There are a lot of concerns to Jason's point about the costs here. And what we're seeing is you're facing those costs, those concerns, those internal challenges, and a need to, despite that, build a unified foundation underneath. Because really, for AI, garbage in means garbage out. You can have the very best AI in the world doing things it should do very well. If you give it garbage data, it doesn't matter. Rubbish goes in, the model won't magically make that rubbish into something beautiful. It will give you garbage results out. So you need that strong foundation from the people and the technology. And even with that, there is a third hurdle, and this is the final hurdle that I see, that very commonly sinks AI projects. And the challenge is really someone wants that AI project to fail. Someone is out there and they are, for whatever reason, not wanting it. Now, that can be, I don't want my job to be automated away. There is definitely a case of some turkeys voting for Christmas, and that can sink projects because people will, even if it's not turkeys voting for Christmas, people will see it as this threatens my job. I'm going to fundamentally oppose it. It can be a case of, hey, it's exposing something that someone wants hidden. Now, for the contact center, we always know where the bodies are buried. And the legal team, Catherine comes up again, a great point. The legal team can absolutely be a blocker here where they will say, hey, this can be great technology, but it's not compliant. It's going to risk customer data being breached. So that's a big thing. But there are sometimes, those blockers and someone wants it to fail because they see it as a risk to customer data. For the contact center, it can also expose, hey, someone wants to keep something hidden, and it's we know where those bodies are buried. We are hit in the face every day. If your billing doesn't work, the contact center are the first to know about it because customers are screaming to them about it. If there's a problem with the product, contact center hears about it. Some of those get fixed, and some of those we keep seeing, we keep seeing, we keep seeing. And it's if those skeletons stay in the closet, it's because someone wants them to stay buried. Sometimes there's an internal political need for it. Sometimes it's a case of there being challenging presentations that would need to be made to executives where, okay, we recognize this problem, but it's too hard to fix, and the execs are going to demand that we fix it. And with the best will in the world, it's better that it stays hidden. Sometimes someone's done something they shouldn't have and they're trying to cover it, but there's a lot of skeletons. And when we start talking about AI, it starts pulling those skeletons out the closet, and it's doing it at a time where there is full C-suite attention on it, because the C-suite is looking and they're saying, look, we need to automate, we need to drive, this is a C-suite mandate. So those problems get more attention, and that makes them more pressured. If we can get past all of those hurdles, though, the first thing that most businesses want to do is to automate. And that again is driven by that C-suite kind of push of, hey, let's reduce costs. Now, as consultants, we are very used to focusing on the interaction. The interaction for contact centers is very much how a lot of businesses view the problem. If you think about average handle time, if you think about CSAT, if you think about all of those metrics, they are conglomerations of individual interactions. Average handle time, it's how many interactions are we having, how long do they take, and what's the average? It's our average handle time for those interactions. It it is a challenge that businesses have, whereas the contact center, the interaction comes in, we're trying to triage it, we're trying to resolve it, and that's what we focus on. For the customer, they're focusing on the customer experience, on the overall journey. So where we see one interaction with one customer, the customer sees this ongoing thing. And I have a pretty good example that came up with an airline that I use regularly, and I won't name names. Most of the time, they're pretty good. I've had a few very bad interactions with them. I've had examples where they've told me my flight's been cancelled, and my flight hasn't been cancelled, but I can't get hold of customer service, and so on and so forth. And everyone's got bad airline examples. But in the case of this airline, they recently sent me a survey to say, how did we do? And it was, you've just had this trip. How did you find this trip? And that the trip was great, but then they were asking, would you recommend us as an airline? Are you happy with us as an airline? And it's a challenging one because the answer to that is honestly not really, because I'm not best pleased with you. But all they're looking at is that specific interaction, so they miss that bigger picture. And the automation is only going to work, the interaction is only going to work if customers want to use it, if it benefits both sides. To benefit the customer, you can't just deflect them. You can't just have that interaction focus. You need to look at, okay, what is the full flow that this customer is facing, and how can I deal with that? Getting the business to that realization can be a real challenge. The but it speaks to that goal, and the goal is still to delight the customer. Automating on its own doesn't delight the customer, but we know, and there's an enormous number of marketing dollars there, that businesses really do want to delight customers. Customers want to be delighted. It's a win-win for everyone. So automation is not a bad place to start, but we need to keep that overall journey in mind when we do it. Automation that helps both sides is great. If we get automation that deflects customers, that blocks them from getting to what they're wanting to do, it's going to fail. So when we're then looking at automation, one of the biggest challenges is finding where to start. And particularly when you're dealing with a wider variety of stakeholders, when you have the C-suite involved, you want some quick wins because you want to be building for a longer, greater roadmap. And generally, if you can show people a quick win in your first, here's our plan for the next 2 quarters, and we'll get some quick wins there. This is the first year, we'll get some quick wins, and you can slide in a little bit of stuff they might be a bit more dubious about. And then when you get to over a year out, you can slide a lot more in, and they'll kind of go, well, we'll let them prove themselves, and then we'll go with it if it works. And you can build that trust, and it allows you to build some of the AI that you need to build in that's harder and that doesn't have as easy a return on investment by pointing to some of those quick wins. So going back to that stat, 80% of your cost is labor. Of the labor, most of that is agent time. And for the agent, you can then dig into, okay, here is how we can save time. You can look at, okay, of that talk time, perhaps 10% is ID and verification, perhaps it's 20%. It will depend on the customer that you're talking to, the contact center that you're talking to. It might be they don't have, they don't have anything to automate that post-call wrap, and that's an immediate, easy. Your agents are spending 11% in post-call wrap when an AI can do at least half of that work by automatically summarizing it. And hey, actually, you'll get a better result because if you look at post-call wrap, the first option for disposition is always the one that's most frequent because it's just the one contact center agents leave it on. So there's definitely some quick wins there, and it might be chat recommendations, it might be email drafting. If your customer happens to have 10% of their interactions as email, having an AI automatically draft a reply to email is a quick win. That gives you some of the low-hanging fruit. If, as part of that low-hanging fruit, you can automate time away for the customer, that's a bigger win overall. So if you can do something that makes it easier to verify the customer, that's great. If you can do it to give the customer a better experience, that's even better, but it is a tougher ROI to present. So when you're trying to build credibility with your executives, when you're trying to build this shared agreement on, hey, what are our first steps? Those quick wins are a lot easier to focus on and to get alignment on than going into some of the bigger, larger, more challenging projects. Now, as we do start to go beyond interactions, there's a great example that I like to bring up, and it's actually Domino's Pizza. Now, what they've done with this kind of, here is our Domino's tracker, you can see what's going on with your pizza, you can see when it's being delivered. What they've done there is they've got rid of all of those calls of, hey, where's my food? For the customer, it's better because I can see exactly where my food is. I don't have to call up. I know, hey, the guy's not going to be at my door for at least 15 minutes. So if I want to take a very quick shower, I can, or whatever else. I know where it is. I don't have to call up. You get some automation for the brand, you get some automation for the customer. Now, automation does not have to be complex. We have an inbuilt feeling that, hey, there's this very advanced AI technology, so we need to use that. For a lot of brands, you can use very simple technology to get a lot of value out. ATMs and banks are a phenomenal example where it doesn't need high complex technology to automate an awful lot of transactions. You can just deliver a very solid experience for your customers with something different, something that's tried, trusted, easy tech. And customer portals are often very much a bigger win as well. So if we take that Domino's example, rather than calling up and saying, hey, do you have this? Do you have that? I want to order a pizza. It's just you go into the app, you see it, you press your buttons, off you go, done. There's no cost to the business to take that order. They don't have to be on the phone. It just happens. And if if you can have customers in a validated portal, it makes everything a lot easier. We're seeing portals popping up all over the place. It's, hey, I want to track my delivery. Hey, I want to sign into the bank and see my statements and then talk. You get rid of all the ID and verification with the portal. You have all of that data and information already united in one place, and that makes it a lot easier to then apply AI over the top of it. It gives it an easier place to surface information, and you also have that ability for the customer to look at their past interactions, their state, who they are, and to get to that solution a bit quicker. So building the right foundation takes careful data cleanliness. It takes an approach to automation, but it also takes a little bit of pragmatism on, hey, how do we get some quick wins here? How do we push that together to solve in the right way? The final point that I want to make, and I want to push very carefully, that this is not me recommending any one vendor over any other vendor. I know that all the contact center vendors will work with Calabria and Verint as a combined entity now, so they're a little bit more neutral, but I'm carefully not recommending anyone here. The point I want to make, though, is AI isn't just empowering customers and agents, it's also empowering the contact center leader as well. Historically, when we look at it, the contact center's always known what's broken, but they've not been able to act on it. We've been a little bit of a silo. The evidence has been a little bit anecdotal. It's, hey, we're hearing it, but if you want to actually say what percentage of every single interaction coming in, you're on a little bit of a hijink to nothing. If you want to do root cause analysis, you're on a little bit of a hijink to nothing. So that's always been a challenge, and it's also often been presented as, well, that's not the contact center's role. But the contact center's role is changing. We are being more strategically involved in a wider set of efforts to deliver across the journey. Every interaction that the contact center has is being analyzed, it is being categorized, it is being scored, and it is accessible. So we have the data, we have that attention from the C-suite on us and on the data, and we're involved in the complete workflow rather than just the triage. So the role is becoming increasingly strategic, and we have an awful lot of soft power that we can pull in, where if you know where the body's buried and you know who's keeping that body buried, you have some extra leverage that you can use if you need it. And that knowledge might just give us the power and the leverage to take a little bit of a step closer to delighting our customers rather than making them want to go and clean a toilet instead. So key takeaways. I think the first one is, as consultants, we very much have the skills. We have skills that are absolutely crucial to solve the problem. We do need to be able to engage a wider audience. We do need to be able to be a little bit more strategic. And we are having to get into a broader technology portfolio than what we've historically been used to. But if we can educate ourselves and bring that education to the contact center, we can help support them through the challenges that they're facing. We do need to be able to align the different stakeholders to do that. We need to be able to get everyone from the C-suite down to agree to a shared vision and roadmap and an approach, and to recognize the reality and the challenges. But with a clean data foundation, with an ability to dodge people who are kind of trying to keep things swept under the rug, keep things from being a challenge, we can get some very quick and easy wins with automation, and then we can roll on that to start to build that real value, to start to improve what we're delivering for the customer, and to make that overall journey better. So it's a lot to pull together, but there's some very real value, and we can deliver on it. So thank you very much to everyone. I yeah, I very much enjoyed the discussion and chat, and I'm going to switch to any questions. And James, Ian, if we want to open it up to a full discussion, I'm very happy to do so as well.
Yeah, great. That was brilliant. Thank you,
Sure.
Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank
There
you,
is
guys.
one we've got outstanding from Jason. If you, I'll just read that one to you. But as Ian suggested, if people want to unmute themselves as well, and after Chris has addressed this call, if you want to start talking live, you can do. But Jason said he's interested to know what feedback you have, Chris, on AI value versus AI issue. And second point, wondering if customers are concerned about cloud cost capture, and will AI offset this?
Okay, so on the value versus issue, AI can create a lot of issues. We have all heard an awful lot of stories. So there's every brand has heard those stories. It's whether it's a police commissioner, whether it's Air Canada, whoever it is, someone's heard about someone really messing up embarrassingly with AI. And there is a real caution that businesses have about that, and it can cause some stumbling blocks. And Catherine raised the compliance, the infosec, the privacy. Those issues are risks that everyone's aware of, but generally there are risks that the business wants to find a way around. The drive is there, the mandate is there that there is enough value that we have to find a way around that risk. So it tends to be a discussion of, given the risks, what can we do first? What's low-hanging fruit? How can we manage those risks, and how can we build towards a better outcome without triggering those risks? So it tends to be, there are obstacles to be navigated around, but the intent is still very much to get there and to get that solution. Jason, does that answer your question?
Are you there, Jason?
I think, and I don't know if Jason can unmute. Feel free to drop something into the chat as well if you need. In terms of the cloud costs that come with it, AI is absolutely rocketing those costs. I think for a lot of customers, there is some regret for moving to the cloud. There is some, hey, this didn't go right. I don't think that's a problem with cloud itself. I think generally it's a problem with how the customers have gone about it. On the cost side, though, for AI, while it rockets the costs, it does also rocket the ROI. So for the contact center, and if I jump back, I have this slide. The ongoing IT cost is 8%. The labor cost is 80%. So if you can drop that labor cost by 10%, you've completely offset that ongoing cloud cost in whatever form it is. So for C-suite leaders, they will look at this cost and they will say, hey, yeah, okay, I'm willing to pay more if it gets me that reduction in other costs, or if it gets me an ROI that I can get behind. Now, I say an ROI that I can get behind because for a lot of contact centers, there is a reluctance to reduce labor. Now, generally for contact centers, if you want to reduce labor, you don't have to lay anyone off. You just, wait 6 months, wait a year, and you've reduced labor. You just haven't hired anyone. But for a business, there is a need to deliver more value with the labor that you have. So one of the points that I've heard, it was actually Jensen Wang who first made it, but it's a brilliant point. And he said that companies who automate away labor are companies who automate themselves out of existence. So they are pushing their footprint of people down to try and reduce cost at a time when everyone else is increasing what they can do with the same people, which means they have a smaller overall footprint in the market. I always push back on this idea that AI is going to give us a 10-hour work week or remove labor. The number of hours we work are very much a function of how much of our life we're willing to give up to achieve a living, to earn a living. And that's a competitive function. So yes, AI lets us do a lot more with the labor we have, but it's not changing how much labor people are willing to put into the market at a fundamental level. I see Catherine's got a hand up, and Jason, I think you're able to unmute now. So if either of you would like to ask more, please feel free. And I might even, yeah, okay.
I thought that presentation was really comprehensive, Chris. I feel like you covered a lot in like 40 minutes. But yeah, we have a very complex remit as consultants, don't we? We need to have a crystal ball as analysts to make sure that we're on the front foot of what's happening and those futures. And if we don't have that front foot, then we're kind of redundant. But also we are marriage counselors, I think, as well, because we need to get all these different lines of business to speak to each other. And sometimes they really do not want to speak to each other. And then within those lines of business, I think you touched on it, you might have people that have not kept certain data up to date. systems are really legacy, and all of a sudden, you know, a budget's been signed off and they're expected to do some work, and they've been exposed. So you've got to win a lot of hearts and minds, and it's not just the hearts and minds of the frontline people that are going to be taking these interactions. There's lots of other individuals, and these individuals are absolutely that. They're individuals, aren't they, with their own sort of quirks. So it's more and more becoming a job, I feel, as therapist. Yeah, we all started out in technology, didn't we?
To be fair, though, if you started in the contact center, your job's kind of therapist from the get-go. It's it does prepare you well for being a little bit of that agony aunt and being a little bit of that marriage counselor. You know, you're used to dealing with some statements that you might perhaps not entirely agree with, and responding calmly and sensibly in a way that you are forced to do because of reality. And you know, you're dealing with that pressure, and you get quite good at biting your tongue sometimes and being diplomatic. So I do think a contact center background sets you up fairly well for that consultant role of, okay, you know, sometimes I do have to bite my tongue and recognize that this person does not necessarily know what they're talking about, but they are a budget holder and a stakeholder, and I need to gently direct them rather than kind of be a blocker, because it'll be a head-on collision.
And I think as regards to who is signing off the budget, and I think, James, this is something that we touched on yesterday, isn't it? I was on a Women in CX podcast last week. I don't think it was this Monday. And it was about why so many AI transformations or projects fail. And as the name suggests, Women in CX is mainly made up of people that have a CX role. And I was listening to them, and it was interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, because it was that they were talking amongst their own group. And I wanted to say, you don't know how the half of it, you know, go and speak to the IT team, you know. And it really did show that they're not speaking to their colleagues in their own organizations. But then also they get really caught up in the fluff. And I always think of, do you remember that Matt Dixon book years ago called The Effortless Experience? And it said, actually, customers' expectations will plateau at a certain stage. You know, I don't want to be sent a bunch of flowers. I just want you to get my thing right and get it right first time. And if you cock up, then just solve it, right? That's all I want. So
But Catherine, can I just ask you?
Yeah.
I thought what you're talking about is fascinating, and what Chris said in that presentation I thought was shocking. And he said that you have the team leaders, who are the operations guys, who are looking for better productivity, better relationships with the customers, and then you've got the C-level, who are trying to drive down costs. They're pushing AI, and the consultants right in the middle of all of that. How do you square that, where you're trying to reduce costs, but the team leaders are trying to generate more productivity? Yeah, hello?
And do you want me to take that one, or
Yeah,
is that
you
one?
can.
So I think the first thing is to identify the ROI where you can go to automation. You can look at, and this is a UK one. I have a US one as well if it's needed. But you can look and you can say, okay, we can halve that post call wrap up. That gives us a solid ROI. But hey, you can also take the team leader and you can say, they have this initiative that they really want to try. If they could just have that extra labor, this will allow them to drive that initiative. So we can keep the costs stable and we can deliver that extra value. And that gives you an ROI you can present to the board, where you can say, here's the cut in cost, and that's a permanent cut in cost. Let's try this initiative. If it doesn't work, that's fine. You know, we cancel the initiative. We still have that cut in cost. But here's how we can actually get more done. And that gives the team leader, the contact center, a chance to build that better experience, to deliver that value in a way that doesn't make the board itchy and worried. And for them, it's okay, I've got 3 months of the same cost before I cut the cost if it doesn't work. So it becomes a much lower risk option for the board. that would probably be how I would approach it. But Catherine, I don't want to cut across you if you've got a different view, if you've got a feedback on that as well.
I think you muted, Catherine.
Yeah. When I was in Zendesk, or in fact, with all the other vendors that I've worked with in the sort of last 10 years, is building out that really watertight value assessment, and comes a lot down to sort of benchmarking what's your current cost to serve, your average handle time, but even, how many administrators do you have, really looking at it a lot wider than just your typical HT, FCR, etc., your attrition, your time to competency. There's a lot more of the metrics that build in that cost of the contact center, and then being able to benchmark it, and then obviously being able to show what the efficiency gains are going to be over time. I've had a situation in the last 12 months where actually a head of CX said to me, I can't present this to the CFO. If I present this to the CFO, it's going to make half my contact center redundant.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's going to be too efficient, which is great. It's a great problem to have. But we had to basically fudge the numbers in the Excel spreadsheet because it looked too good.
Yeah.
And he knew that really it's not as easy as let's just get rid of half the contact center, because automation is going to be so successful. We know it's going to take time. We know there's a ramp up there. And we also know that we are often hit by geopolitical, socio-political factors that come out of left field. And all of a sudden, we've got to pivot really, really quickly. So I think that when we're building the ROI business cases in a mutual way with the key stakeholders, because it's not something that we should do in isolation, we need to kind of equate for buffers for these sorts of scenarios as well. I mean, who would have thought, I hate to mention the pandemic, but, or even Ian, what was being discussed, I think it was yourself today, about the Zoom and other American, platforms now not being allowed in certain geographies. What is the impact going to be on that? And also EU AI regulations and compliance, which is going to become a lot tighter in the next 12 months.
Yeah, and I think we're probably going to have a webinar on that, Catherine, because I think that's a very interesting topic. So we'll be looking for people to speak about that. I think what's fascinating from what you just said and what Chris said is, if there is this kind of disconnection between the C-suite and the team leaders, and I think this was part of Chris's presentation, the way consultants consult needs to change. So it needs to show, because I think they said that 95% of AI projects fail, right? So that's still a very early doors for looking at AI, but we need to be looking at how AI can help, not replace. And I think that's the role of the consultant, to show that. I think there's a great opportunity for consultants there.
And I think we need to find some value add for consultants. This group is perfect, and I'm really glad that I've joined rather than speaking to LinkedIn, and that audience, because as we know, a lot more vendors, myself included, offer free consultancy as part of the sales process. So that value assessment, going into the contact center, sitting with agents, doing the observation, etc., is free as part of, 10 years ago when I started to do this, I worked on the HSBC huge Genesis deal, and we charged for it. That was the last time that I know that there was significant coinage within a vendor partner. And because all of a sudden it became free. So we need to find what is our value, and it would be be really good to build that value proposition together.
Well, since because we're having some separate talks with other consultants about building that value and sharing it in that community, Catherine, and what they're saying is that we had kind of consultancy where we would take one CCaaS and replace it with another CCaaS. Now where we're going, the value a consultant can bring is, how else could you do it? What other AI tools could you bring into workflows across the organization? And I think that is the way that consultancy is going in CX. It's not about CCaaS anymore. It's about a holistic approach to the whole environment.
Can I just make a comment? I've really enjoyed listening to everything. Apologies, I'm not on camera. I must have said no camera when it set up the app, and it won't let me flip it.
That's
really
all right. You have
interesting that
you have a face for radio.
I do, definitely. Yeah, a radio from the 1930s as well. It's that bad.
Come on.
So look, it's interesting, isn't it? We're talking about vendors and the free consulting that they do. A lot of that consulting has been orchestrated and organized around showing specific aspects of the operation that meets what they're trying to sell in terms of their technology. And I did this in previous vendors as well. And what you've got is you've got somebody in the contact center who's got a pain. You've got an idea that there's a cool project they think they can fix with technology. You've got a vendor that reckons they've got a really good way of servicing that, and a nice ROI tool that puts some money on the table that hopefully takes account for utilization and all that sort of stuff, and gets everyone very excited. But in fact, what we're missing quite a lot of the time is how that relates to other issues within the contact center and how that budget and return on investment relates to other challenges in the business. And also, once we've got to the point where we said, right, you've got this problem, you can fix it, here's the money. A lot of the time with this disorganization, lack of connectivity within the organizations, we don't then say, who else is suffering from that problem? Where are the other friends you can get within the business that will appreciate you fixing that issue? And I think there's a lot that we can do there about helping construct a bigger picture of what the problem is, why they're making the change, where are the challenges, where are the opportunities. Finding, I think, really good point about finding the low-hanging fruit, because everyone says, I've got this is my biggest problem, can you fix it with AI? And you say, yeah, if your systems integration is good enough and your data is good enough and the language skills are good enough and you've got experts and if the risk of getting it wrong isn't high. But in the meantime, in the background, you've got items 7, 9, and 11 on a list that might add up to 15% of resourcing, and that could be the catalyst to free up the pressure, take the lid off the old pressure cooker, and allow them to then take the time and learn slowly to do those other projects. So I think between the community here, I think we've got a lot of insight of what goes on. But I see the thing when things fail, it's because right up front, and I mentioned this to who's the guy that's got was asking advice on the forum the other day, Ian, about why projects fail. And I think it's because the IT guys think they've got their golden bullet, their silver bullet that's going to kill the werewolf. And in fact, you need to make sure that everyone around them's got that same vision of the problems, the opportunities, the reasons. And then once you start the journey, you'll know why you're doing it, why you're changing or adding technology if it's necessary, and how you've got a set of rules and an understanding within your peer group and the stakeholders that says when it inevitably goes off the rails or there is a compromise or a challenge, you know where your North Star is and where you're going, so you can actually continue to move and make a success. And I think it's these fundamental issues that we constantly get dragged into with IT, especially when the catalyst for change might be something like your servers are out of date, or your operating system on your servers can't get a certificate, or some idiot's gone to subscription pricing and you haven't got a budget for it, or you've just got a new boss who's just had his chief competitors picked a product and he wants you to do the same. There's lots of stuff that goes in to this thing, and we've got to try and help the companies distill that down, get a pragmatic set of reasons of why they're doing it, where they're going and why. And I think all of these other issues will fall out of place if we get that right. So that's kind of my tuppence into what I've heard, but really good forum. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Derek.
There's two other points that I would probably add in there on, and you make some, you make brilliant points there. I think the other argument that we as consultants should make to the business is that doing nothing isn't an option anymore. And a lot of the time, if you have to decide what you're going to do, having that independent advisor to give you that decision is worth it. And the two reasons that I would point to that haven't been mentioned yet, and there's a lot of good ones that have, but the two that I would point to is, firstly, interaction volumes are relentlessly increasing. So if you don't want that labor budget to go up, you are going to need to automate. You're going to need to be more efficient. You're going to need to deliver more with what you have. That's the first one. And the second one is that there is an arms race going on between businesses and consumers. And your consumer is increasingly consuming AI. So if the consumer has a problem, they may well go to AI and say, what's my legal position here, and what what legislation should I quote? And they may find themselves better legally educated than your agent is. They are better able to find alternatives. They are better able to find information. And in the not too distant future, they're going to have an AI that will go and find those answers and go and have those interactions for them. That is the direction the AI vendors are pushing as well. So being completely unprepared as a vendor, as a contact center, is no longer an option for you.
I think that's very true, Chris. I'm just picking up on the first point, the cost of doing nothing. I think a lot of people, when they get involved in a project, they think, and also what I've always learned, because I've been doing this for 25, 30 years, you need to know whether the people you're dealing with are members of staff or contractors. Because if you're dealing with an IT guy in a contact center who's a contractor, the only way he's going to keep his job is to find a project. And it's a bit cynical to say that, but you do have to work out what their objectives are. But actually, understanding the catalyst for change and the cost of doing nothing, and having that to remind people, is incredibly important, because there will be distractions. They will be excited. They will emotionally want to have the project. They might believe that their problem is the biggest problem in the business, and if you don't fix it, all the agents are going to crumble with well-being issues and die. And they may be true, but you can't lose sight of why you had the change in the fact that you have a compelling event that you have to fix. And sometimes the people get involved so personally going forwards and nitpicking about which vendor or which bit of AI or which interactions. And you say, guys, just stop it. You've got to do something to fix the problem. And maybe you move something to phase 2 because you've actually lost track of what you were doing and why. And that's why I think many of these projects fail. So really good points. And I haven't really thought about the implications of customers being better at what the warranty rules are than your agents, but it's good advice.
Well, we have, funnily enough, just briefly, we have a webinar coming up on the 24th of February with a demo with some live real world bot to agent calls, where a company that we're working with set up a bot with the human's voice and the bot called the agent, and the agent had no idea that it was a bot. And of course, there's some very interesting outcomes from that, where they're going to be able to demo that, and then something that we can be talking to customers about and saying, well, look, you're this far away from it. If you're not ready, this is what your agents are going to have to deal with. So
is that Neo's wave, James?
It is indeed.
I know Maria really well. We are looking at a partnership together, and
there we go.
Not only is that really good, but they also have an EQ coach that I'm looking at. But they're doing some really clever stuff.
Yeah,
and Maria posted today. And I was going to say that actually that is the future, and it's something that we've all been talking about for like many years. You'll be able to ask your home bot to change the date on your direct debit or whatever it might be while you're cooking the tea, feeding the dog, and hoovering the carpet, so you don't actually have to speak to a human agent or even a supplier's bot. So this is true agentic AI. So how are organizations going to build that strategy?
Yeah.
Sounds like a title for another webinar there, Catherine. Guys, that's great. I mean, we've come right up to the hour now, so that was really good content. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions for Chris, or any other thoughts about the webinar? This is the first one we've done, so you can probably see there's a few things we're working through, but we like to test things at the edge. Any kind of comments, any kind of closing comments from you, Chris?
I think from my side, huge appreciation for a great discussion to everyone. I really liked the insights. I liked the chat. It was a fun webinar to do. So James, Ian, thank you very much for hosting. Thank you very much for inviting me to present. And everyone else, thank you very much for listening.